Meet the new Trump, seemingly the same as the old Trump. The most anticipated political speech in recent memory capstoned a raucous Republican National Convention that was heavy on the entertainment factor, but light on actual policy. A convicted felon and candidate facing charges he tried to overturn a free and fair election receives the nomination of a party completely unified behind him. And by the way, that nominee came within centimeters of having his life ended by a bullet, only to triumphantly reemerge days later.
I am running to be president for all of America, not half of America, because there is no victory in winning for half of America.
And to take it one step deeper, that candidate chooses as his running mate a 39-year-old firebrand freshman senator from Ohio who referred to him once as, quote, noxious and cultural heroin, even as, quote, America's Hitler. But now that senator, playing up his humble beginnings, is his fiercest defender.
President Trump's vision is so simple and yet so powerful. We're done, ladies and gentlemen, catering to Wall Street. We'll commit to the working man.
And that's just the Republicans. On the other side, a president being pressured to drop out by his own party. That president comes down with COVID, where he reportedly reflects on doing just that. That means Chicago's Democratic National Convention could be historic, rivaled only by 1968. And what about Illinois? Republicans duke it out for the future of their party as GOP stalwarts of yesteryear stay away from the convention in favor of a new kind of Illinois conservative.
Biggest thing that I'm excited about is seeing the grassroots movement.
And I'm afraid we're not going to be getting anywhere if we're going to continue to have complete homage to Trump and purity on the state platform.
And Democrats grapple with a governor who might very well be on a short list to join a ticket with sights on the White House as an election for the history books comes into view.
Coming up on Paris on Politics.
Former President Trump emerges from a near-death experience to lead a raucous Republican National Convention. Another Illinois Democratic congressman tells President Biden to hang it up. And a Southside Chicago pastor preaches to the biggest congregation of his life.
This is Paris on Politics from Fox 32 Chicago.
Hey, Chicago, thanks for joining us. A softer, more introspective, less incendiary Trump. That was theoretically what we saw last night as the former president accepted his party's nomination to become the next one.
With faith and devotion, I proudly accept your nomination for President of the United States.
And the former president shocked the political establishment with the selection of never-Trumper turned staunch defender J.D. Vance.
I officially accept your nomination to be Vice President of the United States of America.
And our neighboring city, 90 miles up I-94 past the Brat Stop in the Mars Cheese Castle, put on an epic party. But we turn our attention tonight to the developing situation in the Democratic Party. Multiple reports say President Biden, sick with COVID right now, could withdraw his nomination within days and cede the spotlight perhaps to an open primary to decide his successor. This as top Democrats continue to urge the president to step aside, fearing a landslide loss in November. Joining me now is Illinois Congressman Sean Casten, who just came out and joined the chorus of Democrats calling on Biden to pass the torch. You say, Congressman Casten, it breaks your heart to do this. Why call on him to step aside, and why now?
So I didn't want to be here today, obviously. We didn't want to be at this point. I love Joe Biden. He's been arguably one of the most successful presidents maybe ever in terms of job creation, economic growth, recovery from COVID, expanding NATO, biggest climate bill, biggest infrastructure bill.
Not if you go by what we heard at the RNC, but yes, go ahead.
Well, and I mean, that's sort of the problem, right? That if we're talking about decency and character and truth, I have no doubt that Joe Biden wins. If we're talking about the legacy of what he did during his time in office as opposed to what Donald Trump did, if we're talking about which one is a convicted felon, which one is an adjudicated rapist, which one has promised to be a dictator on day one, I have no doubt that Joe Biden wins. The concern that we've had is that since the debate performance, we've been looking for the Biden campaign to make this election about what they have done what they can do and not trip over their words in a gaffe or a public statement. And the stakes are just too high. Everybody I talk to out in the street, whether or not they have a view on who the Democratic nominee should be, they're petrified at what the consequences would be to our democracy and to the world in a second Trump presidency.
Do you think Biden has slowed down with his cognitive abilities due to age right now?
In the conversations that I've had with him, I have absolutely no question about his competence, his understanding of world affairs, his connection to what's going on. So no, I don't have any doubt that he could be president. The concern is, can he run an effective campaign? And it's an unfair judgment, right? I mean, we should judge people by their qualities for the job, but you have to win elections. You have to go out and make your case to the people. And since that debate, he's out of mulligans. And it's not clear that they have a campaign strategy to run a mulligan-free race to shift it to where it needs to be.
There's a lot of debate about this in the party. Would you endorse Vice President Kamala Harris to lead the ticket?
So I'm not endorsing anybody one way or the other. What I'm endorsing is that we have to preserve our democracy. I want to make sure that when we celebrate our 250th anniversary, we're not wondering whether that's the last anniversary that we're going to celebrate in 2026, right? And we've got a lot of great Democrats who can do that. I think any of them whose names are being floated right now would be perfectly capable of making this election a referendum on the stakes, on what's promised to the American people, on whether we want to celebrate the fact that we expanded support for veterans, cut insulin costs, did all these things largely without Republican help, or whether we want to take that away. Whether we think we are still the party of Lincoln, right? The party that passed the 14th Amendment to provide equal protection under the law is now the party that's saying we want to grant permanent immunity to presidents who violate the law. That's how democracy dies. So we've got a lot of people who can carry that message and make this election about that.
And I mentioned this at the top. We've heard reports that Biden apparently has shifted and is considering this, but we just don't know because he has campaign aides go on TV and say, no, he's still in the race. Do you know where his thinking is right at this moment?
He has not called me since I made my statement. So, no. I mean, I think there's a reality in politics that the minute you announce you're going to hang it up, your power diminishes, right? And so what they're saying right now is perfectly consistent with someone who intends to stay in the race. It's also perfectly consistent with somebody who is making a plan for a graceful exit. I don't claim to know which of those it are, but I think the next several days and weeks will be critical.
It's amazing that this kind of changes by the hour. Governor Pritzker, the governor of your home state, the state you represent in Congress, is he someone that you think could be on the ticket?
Look, how the process goes through and who wants to throw their name in the hat, we'll decide that at that time. But I don't. My point in talking to you today, my point in that statement is not because I have a preferred candidate. It's because I want to make sure that we win in November, and it's also because I want to make sure that if we lose the White House, we at least have a House and a Senate that is prepared to fulfill their full oversight function, right? I mean, we're sitting here right now where Jim Jordan is running a weaponization of government committee.
Republican congressman from Ohio.
Yes, while you have Project 2025, that's the Republican playbook for the next cycle, saying we would like to replace all career staff with political appointees who can go after our enemies. This is really dangerous stuff, right? And if we don't have a House and a Senate that's going to say, forget about what party I'm aligned with, the rule of law matters, accountability matters. That I think that Ronald Reagan, when he stood up to Russia, was right. That I think Abraham Lincoln, when he fought against racism and slavery and for equal protection, was right. That is sadly not where today's Republican Party is.
And we saw where today's Republican Party was this week. Gone are the days of George W. Bush appearing or a McCain family member, and in are Hulk Hogan and Kid Rock and the head of the UFC. When you saw the former president's speech last night and what happened this week, what went through your mind?
I keep being reminded of a conversation I had with one of my Republican colleagues when we were in, I don't know, vote 7 or vote 8 of the McCarthy speakership votes. And I want to, out of respect for my friend, no one to name him, but he said that they were really concerned about rules that were being pushed through the House that would make government not work, specifically the motion to vacate, the members they were putting on the Rules Committee. And I said, okay, so are you going to stand up to the crazy wing of your party or let it go? And his immediate response was, how'd that work for Adam Kinzinger? And so when I watch this convention, what you see is people who, in some cases, are way off the deep end. In other cases, are people of decency and character and no courage. And you have to stand up when you see a wrong in the world or a wrong in your own party. I'm not happy about being here criticizing a good friend and a good president, but I think it's important to our democracy that we do that. What happened at the Republican convention this week was a whole lot of people who said, I'm fine with having an adjudicated rapist in the White House. How do you look at your kids and your grandkids in that moment and say, when called upon to act, that was what I did?
Not only fine, but enthusiastic and unified in support. Congressman Sean Casten, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you, Paris.
You bet.
Up next on Paris on Politics.
America has been in an era of what I call violent populism, and it's occurring on both the right and the left.
How did the leader of a small village become known as the worst mayor in America?
She cannot continue to intimidate and gangster her way through this.
From showy billboards and expensive police bodyguards to Vegas trips and retaliation allegations, we bring you an inside look into Mayor Tiffany Henyard and the drama in Dalton. Streaming now at Fox 32 on Fox Local. Search Fox Local on these streaming platforms. Download and watch today.
A new study out of the University of Chicago might shock you when you hear how many Americans say they would support political violence. Joining us is University of Chicago professor Robert Pape, who heads the Chicago Project on Security and Threats. Always good to talk to you, Professor Pape. And very apropos this week, given what happened on Saturday, the first point in your research, you found that 7% of Americans would support political violence to restore Trump to the presidency, 10% to prevent Trump. What should Americans make of these responses?
Americans should see that we are a tinderbox of a country. These numbers that you just mentioned, Paris, were in our national survey as of the end of June. The 10% who support violence to prevent Trump from being president, that equates to 26 million Americans. The 7% who support violence to restore Trump to the presidency, that equates to 18 million Americans. And unfortunately, we just saw with the assassination attempt against Donald Trump, some of the manifestations of why these numbers matter. But more broadly, this should not be thought of as one-off. For 4 years now, America has been in an era of what I call violent populism, and it's occurring on both the right and the left. In the summer of 2020, including here in Chicago, we had massive George Floyd protests, 7 to 10% of which were riots. We also then had 6 months after that, the January 6th riot to stop the installation, the transfer of power to Joe Biden. Then over the last year, starting after October 7, we saw mass protests on many, many college campuses, a fraction of which were extremely violent, storming buildings, controlling buildings, throwing bricks through windows, many, many instances of violence, including at the University of Chicago, where I teach.
Right.
So we are not simply seeing a one-off. And it's important for the media to recognize they shouldn't be reporting each of these as a one-off event. This is an era almost unprecedented in our lifetimes. You have to go back to the 1960s to see anything like this era of violent populism that's been occurring for the last 4 years.
And thankfully, the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee was relatively safe, was relatively well secure. But going back to those that support political violence as it relates to Trump on one side or the other, who are these people when we're talking about tens of millions of people? Do they have access to guns? Do they have access to internet? And what should we be looking out for?
So our surveys are able to ask not just do you support or do agree that the use of force is justified to prevent Trump or restore Trump to the presidency, but do you own guns? Are you a member of a militia group? Do you think that when the police are violently attacked, they deserve it? And what you see in our survey results is that between a third and half of those who support violence own guns. About a quarter, as much as a quarter, are members or no members of militia groups. Nearly all have access to home internet, meaning easy organizational tools. So this is not the problem of organization. It's really not that big of a deal here in the United States. So what we're seeing is a group that has a lot of dangerous capabilities, a lot of potential. And in fact, we've been finding numbers not quite as large as this, but numbers like this in our surveys now consistently for several years. And this is dovetailed with, side by side, these rather large instances and significant instances of political violence that keep surprising the public and keep surprising the news media, when in fact, this is what you would expect when you see survey numbers like the kind I've just presented.
And it seems like Americans think, well, this is the kind of thing that happens in autocracies, in developing democracies, not in the United States. But what you're saying is folks should not think that way. They shouldn't be surprised when they see this. You had another data point that 20 to 25% of your respondents would support violent protest, like you mentioned, George Floyd or January 6th. So what does that mean for the upcoming Democratic convention in Chicago?
So we specifically asked questions in light of the upcoming Democratic National Convention. And we asked questions, would you attend a protest against genocide in Gaza, even if it became violent? And what we found is that, and then we also asked side by side with that, Paris, a question, would you attend that same type of protest if it were peaceful? And what we found is about 25% of the people, the respondents, would attend a violent protest to stop genocide in Gaza. That doesn't tell us exactly how many people will show up to protest at the DNC. What it tells us is a lot about what fraction might become and be comfortable and even push for violence among those protesters. And it's roughly 20 to 25%, which is a stunning number, because what that means is that, let's say you have 100,000 people who protest in Grant Park. We can't predict whether that will turn violent, but if it were to, then really many thousands would be quite comfortable and maybe even participate and support that violence if it were to break out.
All right, Robert Pape, what an interesting time we're living in right now. And I know that there's a lot of interesting research that you have yet to do on everything that is and will transpire going forward. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
Up next on Paris on Politics.
Can Kathy Salvi save the Illinois Republican Party?
Everywhere you look, you have history of the Tribune.
Chicago's most unique skyscraper, restored and reimagined.
Ooh, behind the curtain.
During construction, countless time capsules were discovered,
Had a letter from the sports editor of the Chicago Tribune,
including the most significant relic from the biggest scandal in Chicago sports history. What other wonders does the tower hold? Streaming on your smart TV, only at Fox 32 on Fox Local. Search Fox Local on these streaming platforms. Download and watch today.
We're going to the Crown. Let's do it.
The Chicago suburbs used to be reliably Republican. The GOP could rely on places like Hinsdale or Wilmette or Flossmoor. But the suburbs have trended almost completely Democratic in recent years, leaving Republicans in the political wilderness. And that's the challenge for the party's new leader, suburban attorney Kathy Salvi, who officially took over this week. I went one-on-one with Salvi to ask her how to rebuild this beleaguered party that seems to be in the middle of an identity crisis.
Well, we've been losing ground for sure the last 10 years, and I see a lot of progress just in this last 6 days since I've been listening to people. Alliances are being formed, and we are giving many people the permission to vote Republican who've never even considered that in the past. So I expect that we're going to have election success because of our Republican unified message, this not only in 2024 but beyond.
I've talked to Republicans like Jim Durkin or Pat Brady, you know those names, who say that to win back the suburbs and the collar counties that they used to have, they need to moderate their message, especially on social issues like abortion. Do you agree with that?
I would think that everybody has to feel that they have a voice and they're being listened to. And I think any individual who makes part of the Republican big tent, if you will, needs to feel that their voice is being heard, and I've been listening, and I believe that that is what's going to win the day. By attracting more people and standing by the principles of the Republican platform, and that's what I aim to do as the next chairperson of the Illinois Republican.
Go into some of those principles as you see them right now.
Sure. Well, the three principal issues in Illinois that aren't Republican issues, but resonate with all voters and all families and small businesses are crime, the escalation of crime, and we know that J.B. Pritzker in his Safety Act has been an abysmal disaster for Illinois and has made our streets unsafe. So crime is a universal issue. Another one is the culture of corruption. You mention Illinois to any person here at the convention nationwide, and they say, oh yeah, Illinois, the culture of corruption. We've got the Madigan trial coming up, and I think that we need to restore faith in the political process. So I aim to support all the efforts to clean shop. And then, of course, the third issue, and probably the most pressing to families, is the cost of living. We are the first or second state in the nation for the exodus of people from Illinois. This must stop. And the way we could do that is by have government policies in government passed by supported by the principles of the Republican agenda that will help restore faith and help people to be able to afford gas and groceries. And the tax proposals that are being implemented by Governor Pritzker and the Democrat majority are putting all the mistakes of the past on the backs of Illinois families and small business, and it's driving people to other neighboring states. So I expect to find that unifying message to tamp down inflation and to make it easier for families and small business to stay in Illinois.
So these are issues we expect the Illinois GOP to hone in on. 2024, the elections are only a few months away, but I got to imagine that you're also thinking about 2026, the future. Any names that you like that could run for governor?
So first, to tap it off on the prior question, crime, corruption, and cost of living.
Okay, the 3 C's.
The 3 C's, exactly. And as to the future, we have a huge bench of amazing people who may put their hat in the ring. And I feel as though many of them are vetted and some of them are new to the political process. And what I would like to help restore in Illinois is this understanding that we build through multiplication and addition, we win elections. And so a unified Republican Party and the right messaging will win in not only 2024, but in 2026 and beyond.
You say multiply and build. So there's room in the party for differences of opinion on some of these cultural issues like abortion. I know how you feel about it, but would you welcome people that have a different view on it?
Well, realize as the chair of the party, I'm here to listen, to collaborate, and to communicate well in full transparency, and to invite people with different viewpoints and life experiences to the table. No person who's willing to vote Republican will be turned away under the chairmanship that I give to the Illinois Republican Party. That being said, we have to be better on our messaging. And on the abortion issue, there are a few things that touch a person's heart more, and I will apply my own personal experience with that. You know, I'm an attorney in practice, and I have served women in crisis my entire life. And what we need to do is realize that there are people who suffer, and not give them what we have in Illinois, radical abortion policy through 9 months, and even many of those elected legislators on the Democrat side they're against the Infant Born Alive Protection Act. And I think that's heinous. And I think that what we need to do is ask those Democrat incumbents where would they draw the line on abortion, which is a very personal issue. And I think as to women in crisis, we need to give them something, opportunity different from that. So I'm willing to take any issue out there on, and to face reality and to help people heal.
And finally tonight, a Chicago pastor gets to preach in front of a giant political congregation. Southside rooftop pastor Corey Brooks was asked to give the closing benediction at the Republican National Convention on Tuesday night. I caught up with him on the floor right before he took the stage.
Do you have butterflies? I mean, I know you did a run-through earlier.
You know, I'm a little nervous, but it'll be overcome by the time I hit the stage. I'm really excited for this opportunity to be on a national platform and to be able to pray for the country and our nation is an awesome and wonderful thing. And so I hope I can make Chicago proud and not do anything to harm it.
What do you want to say about Chicago tonight?
Well, you know, I'm a Chicago lover, and I believe in Chicago. We're resilient, and we're gonna be all right. We're going through some tough times and turbulent times right now, but we're going to come out on top.
You are a Republican. Republican Party is not very popular in Chicago or among black voters. Do you ever get grief for that, or what's your message to them?
Yeah, you get grief all the time for having different opinions, different thoughts, but that's okay. Everybody doesn't have to be for what I'm for, and they don't have to believe in what I believe in. I've learned that we're American. That's what makes us Americans, that the fact that we can be different, the fact that we can have different thoughts, different philosophies, different ideas, and still be one nation under God. That's what's really important.
Lord, bless our great nation. From Project Hood on the south side of Chicago to all four corners of the great nation. From the hills of West Virginia and Tennessee to Beverly Hills in California, all the way to the homies in Los Angeles and the homies on the west side of Chicago.
And that's our show for this very historic week in politics. What will next week bring? Stay tuned to Fox 32 Chicago online and on the air. And of course, we will see you next Friday on Paris on Politics. So long, everybody.
Discover Chicago's hidden gems and untold tales.
If you look up, odds are you're seeing our work.
Fox 32's photographers share the stories they've captured with you.
Fountain jet shoots up 150 feet. Our designers, the sky is their canvas.
Streaming now at Fox 32 on Fox Local. Download Fox Local on these streaming platforms and start watching.